With the elections just a week away, we want to know what's the state of press freedom in the United States so far and what's up ahead after this momentous election. We're joined by Kirstin McCudden, managing editor of the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker, to help us navigate these issues. Kirstin, can you get us up to date on key issues around press freedom this month?
For sure. Hi, I'm Kirstin, and this is Aoife, the Pamapoo. It's the end of October, and when we think about the state of press freedom in the United States, we rely on the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker and its data on aggressions against journalists. That's when journalists are physically assaulted or arrested or have legal threats against them, like subpoenas or do not publish orders. We use this data to help us understand the state of press freedom at any given time. The year isn't over yet, but we've already surpassed the number of journalists assaulted in 2024 versus the number of journalists assaulted last year. 75 journalists have already been assaulted this year across the United States. Last year, 45. And nearly 50 journalists, that's 50, have been arrested, detained, or charged with a crime this year. That's 3 times as many as last year. The increase in arrests and assaults of journalists is related to an uptick in protests. This year, mostly related to responses around the Israel-Gaza war and wider conflicts. We've seen protests and journalists covering them everywhere from college campuses to main streets. This is all important because the general election is now under a week away. We don't know for sure that there will be protests or large assemblies around the election, or that journalists will be hurt or aggressed upon while covering them. But historically, that has been the case.
Where do the 2 presidential candidates stand when it comes to freedom of the press?
In short, Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris has been accused of being frosty toward the press and faced criticism for a lack of transparency. In August, for example, the White House photographers wrote a letter protesting reduced access to the Harris campaign. But I want to be clear, Harris has not demeaned the press or threatened to revoke broadcast licensing once in power, as Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has, and more. Last month, Trump said ABC should lose its broadcast license following the presidential debate. This month, he's threatened to sue and subpoena CBS News, saying the outlet should lose its license over the editing of an interview with Harris. These threats align with the data we've gathered around Trump at the tracker from his previous presidency and candidacies.
Do you have any tips for journalists gearing up to cover the elections or related events?
For all journalists, but especially those in the field, covering marches to the polls, protests, or other events in the days ahead, the best protection for yourself and your past or future sources begins even before heading out. Our digital security training team here at Freedom of the Press Foundation recommends taking steps to protect your phone if you'll be using it to live stream or to take pictures, like locking it down with a password in case it's lost or seized. Find resources like this in our guide, Reporting in the Field. Also, be aware of your rights when covering fast-moving events like a protest, like where you can stand, and exceptions for newsworthy events. Finally, know what to do if things don't go as planned, like you've been caught up in a police kettle and detained or arrested. There are legal resources, like from our partners, and documentation, like our U.S. Press Freedom Tracker, where understanding what happens to journalists while doing their jobs gives us this context to the state of press freedom in the United States.